To continue the deep dives on the Poison Bone tree, we have Poison skills, which among them is an S tier skill that easily competes with the likes of Blessed Hammer and Blizzard, though that most people ignore because of misconceptions about poison damage throughout the game. That, and it requires more specific equipment than these other two competitors to truly see itself shine, despite at the high end being significantly cheaper to set up online. Starting at the bottom, we have a skill that multiple people have tried to make builds around because, well, thematically it's cool, but it just doesn't quite hold its own in the long run, and that's Poison Dagger. This is mostly due to two issues. One, Poison Dagger is single target, and two, it has a growing length with levels while lacking the item length truncation of skills like Venom. So basically, while it can get to insane levels of damage with the right gear, the fact that at a bare minimum you're going to have to see lengths that drag out longer than most battles in Diablo 2 make it somewhat junky. And even if you trigger Venom on your character through charges or chance to cast, that truncated duration only applies to items, so you still have the long length of Poison Dagger. It's just that the items don't add to that length very much. So this leaves the only real advantage of Poison Dagger being an attack rating bump for if you want to do melee damage with a Necromancer. Moving further down, we have Poison Explosion, a corpse removal tool with sadly similar problems to Poison Dagger. It does decent damage, but it really has no grasp on duration, which is, well, frustrating as hell, since it basically makes the skill significantly worse than its lower level cousin Corpse Explosion. This, in combination with its somewhat unreliable application of the poison and tiny radius that weirdly does not increase with level sadly, results in it being almost never used, and since Corpse Explosion is a prerequisite for it, even for just corpse removal, you are better off using Corpse Explosion, even if you have this fully synergized. That leads us to the skill that gave this video its title, since through dumping points in the last two, sadly kind of bad skills, you are pumping up what is actually capable of being an S tier skill that rivals Blessed Hammer and Blizzard, and with the right setup, can actually farm far more locations effectively than either of them. This is Poison Nova, easily one of the strongest PVM skills in the game. There's a few reasons for this, starting with the skill itself. It has a fairly solid area of effect, its poison duration is hard capped at 2 seconds, and even though the poison bolts are destroyed on impact, there's enough of them that you can usually take down most if not all of a crowd in one shot. The poison damage when fully synergized and with basic plus skills gear can get to significant levels as well, since once fully synergized it gets plus 400% poison damage with no length increase. The real punch-up, though, is that the Necromancer has a natural skill to break most poison immunities in the game through lower resist, with only a few enemies being unbreakable and those almost always spawning with fodder that can be corpse exploded on them. And you might say, but even if you break the immunities, they will still have high resists, and that's where some items come into play, since -% poison resist, despite having the least resist reducing sources, is still more common than people realize, and will come into effect after lower resist breaks them, meaning they operate at full efficiency. Now, the most popular item for this is Death's Web, but we also have items like Grief, Plague, Rainbow Facets, the partial set bonus on Trangle's Shield, and on top of that, we have sources of +% poison damage as well, which is not as common for other elements. Though it is worth noting that generally you will want plus skills instead when possible to boost the base damage for that 400% we mentioned earlier, but since you're going to be using Trangle's Shield, you might as well use Trangle's Gloves that have 25% on them. But needless to say, with some basic setup, the skill can deal with most areas on players 1, even in super budget gear, and it can trash even player 7 hell with high-end gear. It's just most people don't acknowledge it due to misunderstandings about how it works, and an overvaluing of Death's Web compared to other tools in the toolbox, which results in the other items being dirt cheap comparatively, but even with Death's Web, it's usually cheaper to set up than a full tilt sorceress or paladin. And on top of all this, the Poison Necromancer will actually have plenty of points left over for support skills, so if you want to go into summoning, or even just other attack skills, or even curses to help your team, you will have plenty of points to do that. So, do you enjoy using poison, or have you avoided it because of a dislike of damage over time? And do you think you would consider trying it out at a high-end Poison Nova build at least? Discuss it below, and if you want to see its bony competition, check out the video on screen now, and as always, a special thanks to the channel members, patrons, and Twitch subs that make this content possible.